Okay, I guess we'll get started now. We don't want to delay it too long because all the speakers have each schedule has like a limited amount of time. So we'll start off now. Once again, this is the T2 Mobility Best Practices for Deploying Devices. And the summary of this is rapid advances in mobile technologies are causing fundamental changes to social interaction, resulting in an overwhelming demand for mobile solutions and applications. But flexibility comes at a price. And the plethora of devices and platforms means that one size does not fit all. This session discusses approaches and strategies that deliver the broadest impact with the least distress. Because as you know, when you have all these devices coming into the workplace, it's kind of a new thing. In our office right now, I work with Matt, and there's all these issues of like bringing your own device and getting devices, which are a variety of devices to try to work with the networking equipment that are there, or even disallowing them if they're not allowed beyond. But let me introduce our panel right now. To my left, I have Sherry Amos, and she is, excuse me while I shuffle around a little bit. She has 20 years of experience in education and government industries for Workday. And next over, we have Carlos Thomas. He's the Vice President for Infor Public Sector. Public sector. Sorry, I had my shorthand here. He was born in Hawaii, and he's worked at the company for 16 years and traveled around the globe, working with customers large and small. And then to the far left over there, I have my coworker, Matt Wong. He is working with the state for 10 years in various disciplines, working with applications and cybersecurity and networking. And I am Vic Macapagal. I am the facilitator for this. I've worked with state government for I lose track, over 20 years. And I've worked mostly with like various public information projects, mostly working on the back end and stuff. So when people talk about all these mobile devices coming into the network, I can understand how to get these things to work it takes a lot of effort in the back end as opposed to just getting it to work at home. So I guess we'll start off right now, and our first speaker will be Matt Wong.
Thank you, Vic. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So today, I'm going to give a brief discussion from the state's perspective in terms of, what are the issues, what are the risks facing the state of Hawaii, as well as give some thoughts on how should the state of Hawaii address the mobility movement. So before we begin, though, Sunny was talking about the transformation programs and the various disciplines that the OMT and the state is looking to move towards. So today's discussion focuses on the technology aspect of those 10 programs, and more specifically, focus around security and privacy. So what are some of the security issues and risks we're facing today in terms of, from the state perspectives? So one, these new mobile devices, just by their nature, they have access to a lot of sensitive information within government. It can be via email, attachments, it can be even videos, pictures, or even access to corporate applications. So there's a security issue there. Second, the risk of theft, loss, and disposal. So what I mean by this is, obviously theft is common, right? Because there's the small form factor. Devices are often lost. And what I mean by disposal is, every year new devices come out, right? So maybe 1 or 2 years you can upgrade. So what do you do with that device? Do you give it to a family member? Do you sell it on eBay? Do you sell it on Craigslist, right? Most of the times people will restore to factory defaults, but not everybody does, right? We have no control over that. So we don't know if sensitive information is leaving the state that way as well. Thirdly, malicious software. For the most part, if you're in like the iPhones, like App Store or Google Play Store, the apps are kind of vetted. But if you root or you jailbreak your phone and you try to do these third-party apps, a lot of time there's a higher malware rate, I guess, that's present in these types of stores. So that's another issue. And then finally, insider use. just our very nature of working in government, right? We have a lot of access to sensitive information, and we don't know how it's leaving via, you can email your personal email accounts, you can use file sharing services like Dropbox. So these are the kind of issues that we face in government today. So in turn, though, what is the impacts? So for one, if sensitive information is leaving the enterprise or the government, there are acts out there that if sensitive information like personally identified information is posted, whether it be inadvertently or maliciously, there are various breach notification acts that take place. You have to write reports to the legislature. There's all these procedures you need to follow. So there's a high amount of risk there for the state. Secondly, security posture. What I mean by this is the overall security posture of the state of Hawaii. As we try to build a different defense in depth strategy, mobility is one component of that. So if we're not secure on that front, it just weakens the overall posture of the state. And then finally, the public's confidence, right? Like say your own information is posted publicly, you lose confidence in the government's ability to protect your data. So next, I'm going to turn to, I want to just talk to you about some things you can consider in terms of how do you address the situation. So first, you need to define your scope. Are you talking about Windows phones, iPhones, Android, BlackBerry? You're talking about state-issued devices, personally owned devices. And from there, you can define your use cases as well. Are we talking about, say, an office worker that never leaves the building, always on site? Or you talk about a mobile worker that half the time is in the office, half the time they're on the road. Or you're talking about like a traveling worker, like that's never in the office. So when you know your scope and your use cases, it helps you to define your standards. And basically your standards are the low-level mandatory controls that you need to protect the information. So these are things like authentication, encryption, device management. And so once you have those standards, you can actually integrate this into the procurement process. And what I mean by this is you can almost create your requirements documents. So when you go and see your vendors, you have the bare minimum that you need to satisfy. And then if eventually, you do procure, deploy, and implement, it kind of changes back all the way to the top where you can now enforce these standards at the technical level. So briefly, I'm going to talk about just 3 types of controls: authentication, encryption, and device management. So authentication, it's really your first line of defense in the mobile aspect. You can define authentication in terms of like password complexity requirements, even 2-factor authentication, or even with the iPhone 5S right now, you can do biometrics. You should also consider things like inactivity timers, right? If you don't set one and you just leave your phone down and somebody picks it up, basically all your security is gone because they have access to the device. And then finally, failed login attempts. You should strongly consider putting this in there. Say after 5 failed attempts, right, the device is wiped. Just be considerate, though, that if you are in the BRLD area, you may not want to wipe the whole device, or at least let your users know that this is happening so they understand what they're getting into. So another thing to look at is encryption, right? Encryption must be teamed with authentication, or else it doesn't serve any purpose. Encryption gives you that second layer of protection. If your phone is lost or stolen, you just have that assurance that, they can't get into it. And then finally, especially in the Android phones, you have removable media encryption capabilities now, whether it be a micro SD card or actually you can almost just plug it into a computer and it's like a big USB stick, right? So you should also consider, do we want to encrypt removable media as well, just to protect the state as well on that aspect. And then in terms of device management, I have a listing of just some things to keep in mind. So remote wipe capabilities, right? If an employee reports a device is lost or stolen, can you remotely issue a wipe command to that phone? Device diversity, get an idea of define the types of iOSs or Androids or Blackberries or whatever you want to support, and make sure those systems that you look at, those device management systems, support those. Integration, does it integrate with your environment? Like if you have Active Directory, can you tie that mobile device management system into your existing infrastructure? Policy enforcement, so every department's needs are unique, right? So will this solution help satisfy your requirements? Then finally, security. What I mean by this is, can it detect if a phone is rooted or jailbroken? Containerization. This is along the lines of some of the technologies now, they can create a secure container where you can put your enterprise apps in there. So that's another way of certain vendors are handling the situation. So that's another capability you might want to explore. Inventory capabilities. Can you see what apps are out there? Or sorry, can you see what version of software you're running out there, and like storage levels, things of that nature. Software deployment. So can you push your enterprise apps out to these devices? Can you issue updates, things of that nature? Administration and reporting. Can you globally see all your devices in your system? Can you generate reports on that? Can you manage everything? IT service management. So what I mean by this is, can it integrate with your help desk functionalities? Because if you're mobile, right, and we're all not working 24/7, is there like a self-service model if somebody gets stuck at like 2 in the morning or something like that? And then finally, the delivery model. There's various types of deployments out there, whether it be cloud-based, you can do on-prem, or there's even hybrid solutions. So those are just some of the things you should consider when you look at vendors in terms of device management. So when you look at all this together, what are some of the benefits that the state will receive? For one, right, the reduced amount of risk. If you have control of the situation, you're defining the standards, you're implementing technologies, you're using encryption, the chances of personally identifiable information leaving the state government's network or just enterprise control, that risk goes down. Secondly, the security posture of the state will increase, right? So for addressing the mobility aspect, because it's one component of the overall security framework, but having that secured or addressed, or at least heading down that path, the overall security posture of the state increases. And also, to be honest, right, everybody uses mobile devices, and sometimes they use them for work, and they're just trying to do their jobs better, right? And if you do it securely, productivity will go up. And what does that get you? Happy employees. I was kind of debatable on that one. I was thinking maybe less unhappy employees, but try to be positive, right? So, as I conclude my portion of the presentation, I just want to let you know that I'm the acting security IT manager for the state of Hawaii. And if you're interested in learning more about cybersecurity, if you want to learn about the new projects that we're doing, I have my contact information up there. Feel free to reach out to me. We're always looking for help. There's only basically like 4 of us doing this. So with that, thank you, and I will turn it back to Sherry.
Just letting everybody know that we will have questions and answers at the end of all the speakers.
So I just
kill the PowerPoint.
kill PowerPoint.
Just kill the PowerPoint. Close the
Oh, there we are.
number 2.
And to put it in full screen. Oh, here we go. All right. We're using someone else's machine here. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I'd like to, a couple of points I'm going to cover and take maybe a different perspective from the technology and the security perspective is a little bit about trends that are going on in the industry, what we see in the industry, and a little from a business perspective, maybe some additional things to think about strategically. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes telling you what's a Workday. I'm getting a few of the questions. Who's Workday? What's Workday? Why are you here? So we'll introduce who we are and why we're talking about mobile as well. But I'd like to see just a show of hands. In your household, how many of you have at least one mobile device? Sort of show of hands. Okay, keep your hand up if you have 2, 3, 4. So I think, you're sort of right on trend here. Here's a survey done by the Pew Trust Center. They are a nonprofit organization that does a lot of research into many different topics. And this is their latest survey results on mobile ownership in the US. And so if you see on the top line, approximately 92% of Americans have at least one mobile phone, cell phone, smartphone kind of device. As you go on down the list and you see all the other things that are being tracked, how many people have a desktop computer, how many people have a laptop, a tablet. You see in the center there sort of gamification, MP3 players and game players. So I think the point here is this mobile device market is just continuing to explode, and I think many of you probably have seen the devices change at least every 6 months. The operating systems change, new ones come out. And so this is part of the strategic challenge of putting together a strategy about how government wants to, adopt policy and a strategy, because this is only going to proliferate more and more. And I think also a part of this study, there's something already in the US like 326 million wireless subscribers. So it's just exploding more and more, and it's a way of life, I think, which is why we're all here today. And so trying to understand how you deal with that requires a lot of thought, certainly around security, certainly around device management, but maybe even more strategically, what is it that you want to deliver to a device, and to whom are you trying to deliver? So just a couple minutes about Workday. What do we do? We are a 100% cloud provider of administrative solutions for government. And so when our company was founded, which was just 8 years ago now, one of the ways of thinking that we wanted to come to the table creating solutions was, technology has rapidly changed. There are a lot of modern technologies that can sort of prevent some of the challenges that we've had technologies of the last 20, 25 years. And I'll talk just a little bit about that, what that has to do with mobile. But I think this quote really sort of says it all. You can't solve, significant problems today with the thinking that we still used yesterday. So, and also with the theme of the conference that we heard this morning, sort of coming to the table with a creative and open mind as you're all here to sort of learn and hear different perspectives is wonderful. So when we set out at our company to deliver the most modern administrative solutions for government today, we looked at these 3 factors. A lot has changed in the world of software. Obviously, user expectations. You want that Google-like, eBay-like experience. It's becoming prevalent. It's just what people expect. It's what citizens expect. It's what employees expect. The changing technologies, mobile, which we're talking about today, and cloud. Whether it's hybrid cloud, private cloud, public cloud, these are things that where technologies are taking us into the future. And then the changing business landscapes, the changing expectations. Obviously, in government, citizens have a much higher expectation of how they're going to interact with governmental services. I'm sure many of your organizations are changing. So one of the things that we said when we designed our solutions, first of all, we're going to take advantage of all the most modern technologies that solve some of the problems we used to have. And one of those technologies is what's called, on the bottom layer, foundation layer, it's what's called in-memory computing. A lot of the restrictions of prior systems were you had to have a database for the HR system, you had to have a different database for the finance system, you had to have a different database for another system. And it was because of the technology constraints that you couldn't process all that data in one place. It couldn't be unified because the technology was constrained. So in our solutions, we use in-memory computing. There is no database. There is no database constraint. Everything is processed real-time in memory. And that is an advancement in the technology that now allows us to solve some of these problems, like bringing a complete unified solution for HR, payroll, finance, et cetera, to a customer, to an employee in a unified way. You don't sign out of one system and into another. And we also deliver it on what we call a mobile-first policy. So everything we design to deploy on a mobile device. And designing solutions for this small form factor, whether it's a smartphone or it's a tablet or, you still want to use a web interface, it takes a lot of thinking about how to do that and how to have people be productive accessing solutions from that perspective. So the other thing that we're doing because of this technology is now you can have analytics that are embedded real-time into the business process. And so you can also deliver not only the transactional system that you need to interact with, but also the analytics, the dashboards, things we were talking about this morning, your open government, your performance kind of metrics. So that can now all be delivered in the same way. So that's what Workday does. Now why we're talking about mobile, we have a mobile-first policy for all of our solutions, any device, anytime, anywhere. And part of the advantage of our being a cloud provider are our customers are always on the most current release. There are no old versions, there's no backward porting, there's no backward compatibility issue. So as all these devices change, as the operating systems change, as we need to deliver capabilities on different devices, our customers are always current on an innovation path forward. And that's part of what we can do, provide to our customers, so you're not trying to take on this burden of how many devices, what kind of device, what kind of operating systems, what do I have to support. We do all that at Workday for our customers. Now, another thing I think that's important to consider when you start to think about what kind of citizen services, for instance, you want to deliver on a mobile device, not only do people want to be mobile, but they want to be social and collaborative. And there are a lot of initiatives today about open data and exposing government's data and allowing crowdsourcing development of the application, what to use with that. An example is perhaps exposing your GIS data, your location data, and letting citizens have access to that data and create the mobile apps that they would find most useful. So those are perhaps some of the things to think about. I also had the opportunity to present at a couple of other state digital summits similar to this one, and one of the topic areas was IT skill sets of the future. We all hear about government has a retiring workforce. How do we attract young talent into our workforce? Sort of what is the makeup of millennials? How do we attract them into government? And I think these kind of projects, these kind of mobile projects, citizen service projects, are exactly the type of projects that you want to attract young talent to help you with. So that is a potential way for you to think about, how to infuse new talent in your organization is to associate them with these kind of projects. Now, as we start to think about, really, what do you think about when you're developing strategy? And I think the first thing is, what is it that you want to deploy on a mobile device? Just a couple of years ago, government was basically just worried about email. We have BlackBerries, we have BlackBerry server, we just want people to have email. BlackBerries are on the way out, and now it's a lot of other things. So what kind of application do you want to deploy? What kind of citizen service process do you want to deploy? Who are you trying to reach? And again, of course, as we're talking here today, on what kind of devices. And I think another important topic to think about, to the point of does one size fit all, is what's the risk profile relevant to the data that you are going to put on the device? Because one thing I know government likes to do once the legal folks come in the room and the procurement folks come in the room, it tends to turn into a conversation about zero risk. We don't want to take any risk. And I think you have to change thinking about that a little bit. What is the risk profile of the data that you are going to share mobily? And so there are a couple other things. BYOD, bring your own device, I know is a topic for many governmental organizations. Today in the corporate world, we just do it. I brought my own personal device. I got synced up on email. My understanding with my company is if we have some kind of a lost device, they're going to wipe my device clean, which includes all my personal information. I understand that. So I think we do now see government allowing BYOD policies because it is a cost containment factor. Just a couple of years ago, the state of California recalled 25,000 mobile devices that they'd issued to their employees because they couldn't afford it anymore. So I think, think about that a little bit also. To reimburse or not to reimburse people if you allow them to bring their own device, there's the next question. And I think the point made earlier about, what kind of workforce do you have? If you have people who are mobile service people, you may have different categories of employees that you have a different reimbursement policy for. So that's another thing to consider. And, ultimately, I think as I shared here, users want choice, citizens want choice, employees want choice. So really thinking through a whole strategy for your organization, what kind of applications, who are we serving, and the security aspect is certainly important, but it's not the only thing to think about. Legacy systems, I think, is another area inherent in government. A lot of custom systems, older. It's difficult to figure out, the mobile deployment of those things, and one reason is because they're not encrypted. So in the mobile world, and Matt talked about this a little bit, the most secure data is data that is what's called encrypted at rest, when it's sitting in its original system, and also when it's in motion, when it's communicating with the device. And so more modern systems today, the data is encrypted all the way through the cycle. Another point to think about is the data going to be stored on the device? Because often the device is just a viewer, the data is not actually stored there. And again, just thinking about your risk profile. So I'll leave you with that because I know I've gotten the sign here. And just a couple of other things. I just added at the bottom there additional resources. There's a wonderful public website that NASIO, the National Association of State Chief Information Officers, has published every state and the mobile applications that each state has submitted to NASIO. So I think if you go to that site, you can get a really good idea of not all the mobile applications every state has developed, but many of them, and sort of, what kind of applications are they, what population of the citizenry are they serving, which department developed them. And then the second item at the bottom there is the GSA, the federal government. The federal government has also done a lot of work on policy about mobile devices across all the federal government agencies. And I think that might be a good place if you just want to get some information about how someone else is thinking about it. To Matt's earlier point, productivity is definitely a benefit of bringing more mobility to the employees and to the workforce. So with that, I will stop and turn it over to my colleague Carlos, and hopefully just giving you a little bit of a different perspective there.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Thank you for having me out here at your digital summit. I always love coming home to Hawaii. This is where I grew up as a kid, so it's always great to come back here. And we were asked to do a couple things. We were asked to come here and speak on mobility. We were asked to relate it back to the transformation plan. And what I want to do in terms of introduction, Vic mentioned, my name is Carlos Thomas, and I am from Infor. For the past 16 years, I've been with the company, and we exclusively focus on public sector, state, local, federal, education, utilities, et cetera, government only. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was looking at the agenda, the one that you guys have, the one where you decided what you were going to go to, I was reading it, And I was looking at it, and I said, I want to look at it from a different perspective in terms of mobile, in terms of deployment, in terms of social. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about was Marco Rubio. Just by a show of hands, who knows who Marco Rubio is? Have you ever heard the name? Some of you guys know that? My 14-year-old knows who Marco Rubio is. He was the guy that was speaking to the nation, and he got a little thirsty, right? And he needed a glass of water. He was getting a little white thing. You know, public speaking is not always the easiest thing to do. He was getting a little white thing around his mouth, and he was, struggling with his speech. So he reached, if you guys remember, he reached over to get that glass of water, almost went off camera, and then he came back and drank the water. And the reason why he drank that water, because it was there. He was leveraging what he had. If I were to ask Vic right now for some water, he would not go downstairs or across the street to get me some water. He probably would get a glass and pour me water because it's right there. And so what we're talking about at Infor is leverage. We believe that as a state of Hawaii, as a government agency, you should leverage the technology that you have around you every day. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you take advantage of those types of things? So what we're going to be talking about, and I have a little agenda on the left-hand side that's going to guide us through our little talk here. We're going to be talking about how we can leverage technologies around us every day. And then at the end of my talk, one of the things that I want to do for you is let you know how you can get there, right? A lot of times you go to a presentation, you hear something, and okay, what do I do next, right? And I want to be able to give you that here today. As Sherry talked about, just so you understand, who Infor is, at a high level, we are a software vendor. We develop a lot of products for government, HR, payroll, finance, work management, permitting, utility billing, 911, 311, all these different types of things. That's what we do at our core. But what I want to do is talk about how our clients leverage technology that's all around them, but use us as the foundation. All right? So here are some of the clients, and I decided to take a few. There's over 3,900 clients that we have in public sector. Let me come down and talk to you a little bit instead of being up on the stage. So we have a lot of clients that do business with us today. They run all of their operations. I have some clients listed up there, the state of California, Department of Pesticides, Caltrans, they all utilize, a lot of enterprise applications. New Hampshire, Michigan. We have New York City, Department of Parks. They have over 1,000 mobile devices deployed to their employees. But what I want to do is talk about a particular client, and I want to talk about that one right there. The city county of San Francisco, population 809,000. One of the things that they decided to do was to leverage. And their CIO, John Walton, who's now the former CIO, he moved to another agency, had an idea. And I want to share that with you, if I could. But I think what we need to do first is relate it, what I'm about to talk about, to your transformation plan, because I think that's key for you to understand. So I was doing some light reading. I love reading, and you guys have a lot of content out there on your website. And one of the things that I saw was this particular one. This was one of the foundations of your transformation plan. And so one of the things that I saw, and Sonny talked about it in the opening session, he wanted to have open government. He wanted to have transparency. These are things that are important. And if you go on and read collaboration, participation, innovation, these things start to get me excited as a vendor. And he wants to encourage citizen involvement. That was one of the things he talked about as well. And I think that is very important to contribute to a better quality of life here in the state of Hawaii. Solve problems. The state will leverage new technologies. These are all things that they want to do. They want to use mobile. Mobile is everywhere. Sherry had everyone raise their hand and talk about how many mobile devices they have. And mobile's everywhere. I was on a flight going from Hawaii to Chicago the other week, and there was a lady sitting in front of me. And she said to her husband, she said, if you looked at that mobile device as much as you looked at me, and you can kind of guess what the story and where it went. Mobile's everywhere, right? It's everywhere. And so how can we do that? How can we improve the experience? Whether you're an employee of the state or whether you're a citizen. Now, every single person in here is a citizen. When you go home at 4 or 5 or 6, You're a citizen. So you understand what they go through as well. So let's take it a step further. So what the City County of San Francisco decided to do, and they utilize our applications as their backbone, they decided to incorporate Twitter. They did this. So let me explain, what that means. And I'm going to give you an example and use it as our first case study. The City County of San Francisco, if you were to go to San Francisco, you can go to Twitter and you can tweet a problem that you see in the city to the city's Twitter page, all right? And what are some of the things you can tweet? I gave some examples at SF311. So when you do that, I saw a pothole. I was heading northbound. You can go ahead and tweet other things. I was at City Hall, and one of the rooms, the AC wasn't working. That could be from an internal employee. And what happens, that tweet, if you will, goes and generates a service request in the back office, which is our software. But what it does, it allows the citizens to be able to collaborate with their government agency and have more continuity. So here's an example, and I took a couple of shots because I wasn't sure if I could connect my phone to the projector here. This is Twitter. This is not our software. This is Twitter. This is leveraging what's already out there. So someone can go out there and they can go in and someone put at the bottom, hey, at SF311, there's someone double parking. It will generate a service request. You can see it in further detail. You can add images. It'll generate a unique service request number. Our software will. And when that problem gets taken care of in the field, all right, he will get notified on his own Twitter page, all right, leveraging existing technology. So if I were to take this and take a look at some of the other things, these are some of the automated responses that come back. So when you put in a request in City County, San Francisco with Twitter, it goes into our software. They do their thing in the back office. They assign it. They use mobile devices, all that nice stuff. But the key thing is it gets back to the citizen. Here's your service request number. Here's your update. Now I'll tell you this. I grew up in Mililani Town. If I submitted a service request somewhere out there in Mililani Town, right, and I got a response back within a minute or two saying, hey, we got it. And then tomorrow I get another response saying, it's in process. And then 2 weeks from now, I get a final one saying, we've taken care of that problem for you. I will think the state of Hawaii is the greatest place in the world, right? Leverage, right? So we can deploy it, we can do all that stuff, but we're not going to talk about that. So what are the benefits? One of the things that they talked about in the little speaker thing, what we want you to accomplish is talk about the benefits. The benefits, in my opinion, is seamless integration between the citizen and their government. Seamless and leveraging existing technology, right? Let's go back to Hawaii. This is number 7. I was on number 6 before. This is number 7. And this particular one, and Sonny talked about it as well. He talked about, the website, right? myhawaii.gov. You're familiar with it? And one of the things he wants residents to be able to access information. Transparency is one of the tracks. Transformation, this is what's one of the tracks that we're talking about. And he talks about residents, he wants them to be able to work efficiently online. Citizen, Joe Public, you and I, we're citizens, again, when we go home at 5 o'clock, all right? So what I want to do is use another example, and I'm going to use the city of Houston. City of Houston, population 2.4 million. They're the 5th largest city in North America. They are also a client, and they use our software as a foundation to drive a lot of their activities and business, what goes on. But what they decided to do was take our software and extend it with something we all know and potentially love. I love Google, right? It's simple, it's easy. So let me kind of explain what they did in my second and final example. They decided to impose a new tax on the populace. They actually approved it. It was for impervious area, storm drainage, where water can run off. They have a very poor infrastructure. And so they have this process to where when you get a bill, when you get that new bill, that new storm drainage bill, I can, citizen, Joe Public, go online. I can pull up my property if I choose to. I can measure my property to see if you measured it right, and it'll calculate the bill on the fly, right? Giving the citizen the ability. They can do it on a mobile device, they could do it on their desktop, a tablet, wherever they choose to do, wherever they can catch a browser. If they don't agree with the bill that they got a stormwater bill in the mail, they went to the Google page, and there's some extensions along the left, and I'll make it a little bit bigger for you so you can see it. They can start a case, and they can click a button in Google Maps, and it generates a service request. It'll generate a case, all right? So taking the Google Maps that you know and taking it to the next level, that's what they've done at Houston. And then it goes to the final process, they review, they end up billing it, and they pass it to the GL at the end of the day. But the core part that I wanted to talk to you about was this. What you see on the right-hand side is Google Maps. What you see along the top, you see other things. That's Google API Enterprise Toolkit for those techies that are in here, all right? You buy that from Google, so enterprise license. It allows you to extend functionality out internally or internally. Well, on the left-hand side, I can click any button and I can see what's going on. I can see the drainage charges. I can see, other projects and what's going on. And so the impact or the result of this, they generate an additional and collect an additional $125 million in revenue from the citizens through our application and Google, right? And they offer transparency, all right? Internally, so they can see what's going on. Sunny talked about dashboards, talks about getting to information. It's great that you collect data, but if you can't get to it, it does you no good. So within the city of Houston, I'm going to take my mouse here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this real quick. And you guys can go here. This is all out on the web. This is rebuildhouston.org for those of you that are writing. And so this is the particular one. So now I have a lot of information. What can I do with it? I can come in here and I can see other projects that are going on by clicking on this little check mark here, and then it's going to go ahead and load up, if you see those little green ones, these various projects. And I can click on any one of these projects, and I can drill down into it, all right? So it's a little bit more than you used to with Google. Normally, you used to go in getting directions, maybe getting some restaurant reviews, but now I have transparency. I can scroll down here. I can see the street projects that are going on for traffic and what's going on, and it's going to go ahead and lay that on my screen as well. And I can drill down into any one of these, and I can see where it's at, how much they spent, what's going on. I can see the ones that need priority. Where's the problems in Houston? And so what it's going to do here is give me a color coding, a lot of problems, and it's giving almost like a damage assessment, all right? So this is, again, an example of how you can do things. And just as a final note, Infor, we work with a lot of different government agencies, state agencies, cities, counties, school districts. Over 3,900 clients utilize our stuff as a backbone, but what we try to get them to do, as I said at the start, was to leverage existing technology that's around us every day, right? You don't need to go out and make a huge investment in some package if you have technology that's around you every day. So as a last note, what I want to do, and I talked about next steps, all right? If you have questions, we're going to get into a Q&A panel here with Vic, and he's going to lead that. I put a business card of someone else up here. That's our person here on the island. If you want to write down his email, if you have any questions about anything we said, you can definitely do that. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Vic, and thank you guys for your time.
Okay, I guess we're now over at the portion where we have any question and answers, a little question and answer session. So if anybody has any questions, now is the time. Does anybody have any questions? Well, actually, I have a question. It's more about trends, and I guess maybe even leveraging technology. I guess we can see the trends in the public sector about people using more and more mobile devices, et cetera. But I guess in the workplace, do you see like the trends of bigger organizations having the Windows desktop, which is ubiquitous pretty much in every office? That's kind of disappearing nowadays, I believe, right? And it probably will disappear. And how would that be leveraged if these things disappear? I don't really know what I'm quite asking here, but it's just more like I see a future that's kind of cloudy, like Windows desktop's disappearing. What about my apps? We're going more mobile. What's everybody else doing?
Yeah.
Do you have any comment on that?
Is this on? Can you hear me? I think from the trend perspective, that's absolutely true. On the chart that I showed up there, you may not have noticed it, but PC desktop machines are trending down. Laptops are trending up, and tablets are one of the fastest growing mechanisms now. So, you know, I think for government in these hybrid environments, which we have, which are very heterogeneous and very large, you know, thinking about how you're going to gradually sort of move certain types of functions, processes, et cetera, you know, to the newer devices, while you still, to Carlos's point, you want to leverage the investment that you've made in what you have and gradually figure out how you're going to move the desktops out. And it may not be, you know, tomorrow, but again, thinking through what kind of business functions. This morning, I think I heard you have 35 lines of business, something over 200 sort of business functions today that technology is supporting here on the island. And I think that's what your leadership is trying to do, is look at that strategically. But it's definitely probably going to happen faster than we think it will, that desktops will just disappear. I mean, look at the sort of BlackBerry scenario. It was the hottest thing going for a couple of years, and it very quickly is not anymore. So that's how things are rapidly moving.
Yeah, from my perspective, in terms of, you know, the change that's happening, it's very rapid. You know, there was a commercial with Best Buy, and the lady bought a 3D television. She came home, had it delivered, and then she saw a truck go by, and it said 4D now available. Right? It's happening so fast, and you know, Sherry hit on something in her presentation and also in her response. You know, BlackBerry, we joke about it. It used to be the dominant thing. You know, Microsoft is here, and they're a partner of ours. They fell behind on the mobile piece, and I'm here to tell you, and I may ruffle a few feathers. You may laugh at me, but 5 years from now, Apple and iOS probably will not be where it's at today. You'll probably be laughing about Apple the same way you're laughing about BlackBerry. So what are we doing as software vendors? One, we always have to stay on the cutting edge, right? We always have to keep our ear to the street. But we believe as a company that developing apps, like when you go to the iTunes Store or Google Play or Windows Mobile, we don't believe that's where the future is. We believe developing natively within the application using technologies like HTML5 so people can do dynamic rendering regardless of the tablet they have, regardless of the mobile device they have, so they don't have to focus and develop and spend dollars on that. We think that's where it's going, and it's always going to change. It's moving exponentially. 5 years from now, it's going to be totally different.
Yeah, because I just take a look at the technology that's out there right now. Like, we're all familiar with the mainframes, and we just can't get rid of them. They're still always there. And we all have these PC applications that people use to put out reports. But I don't think we can keep the PCs out there as like the mainframes, because all this stuff has to be moved somehow into something that's more portable for all of us to fit into in this ever-changing mobile world. So something that all of us have to think about, I guess, in our jobs. We have to be a little bit more, I guess, nimble technology-wise in our jobs, I guess.
I think from the state's perspective, I mean, I'm sure most of you are in the public sector in this audience, and we just see how, you know, government takes a little longer to move. You know, I mean, actually kind of what you're saying is quite surprising, actually. I mean, because, you know, we all view Apple as kind of the it device to have and things of that nature. And like Vic said, yeah, I mean, we're a heavily mainframe environment, you know, we just leverage Office so often in our daily lives, and you know, I think it's going to take a little while for the state to embrace that change, or at least have the infrastructure to support that. So, but you know, having said that, there's technologies that address that situation, whether it be like virtual desktops to kind of maintain that environment that can be pushed out to mobile devices to, you know, kind of bridge that gap of helping the state be more agile and flexible to catch up with the private sector and in terms of like our personal use. So, you know, my opinion is it's going to take a little while, but yeah, we'll get there.
Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, yes. I guess your question is like if you use your personal device to access or do government work, does it become like a government device, in other words? Does it? Oh, oh, I see. I don't really know the answer to that. Like, maybe Matt would have a better input on that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question exactly, but I would treat it such that, a lot of information that, well, basically government records, right? So if you are looking at files on your phone or your tablet that's work-related and something happens, I would have the expectation that your device can be searchable if it comes to that, and whether the scope involves your personal, I don't know. I don't know, but I would just keep that in mind that that could be a possibility. Do you mind repeating that one more time, a little louder?
They're going to come back and say, hey, I need my personal device to work. Is the union going to come involved and say, hey, can you do that or can you not do that?
The unions, yes. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of different factors involved. I think BYOD, or just mobility in general, it's just a stark contrast with government, because you're used to, like, you have your set hours, like anything outside of that is like overtime or like standby time, and like, if you check your email at night, like, does that kick in standby pay, So I think those things have to be addressed, as the policies get developed, we try to work those in there, or at least consult with the unions, just to see if there's any areas that we weren't aware of that we have to be cognizant of. So I understand your point, but it's all part of the bigger picture of how we move forward on the issue.
And I can't speak specifically for Hawaii, but other governmental organizations that I have seen implement these policies, that has not been an issue, that your personal device becomes government property. The other way around is an issue if the government issues a device, but you're using it for personal reasons. That's typically what has been the situation that policy tends to address. It's a good question, and again, it's part of why we're here talking about think strategically through the whole process, not just about the device security.
Yeah, I guess some of the issues are just not just technology related for the state. It's more, there's a lot of policies that have to go into place first and get everything written out on paper first, so that, we're not like the private sector, I guess, where your boss can just tell you it's going to be this way. At the state, it's a little bit more, I guess.
And you can always turn your device off after hours.
Yes, there's also that.
I've done that myself.
But it's so hard sometimes. Any other questions? Well, I think I have one more question concerning, I guess, all the mobile devices that are out there right now. I think I might have missed it in probably what you were asking, but are there any offices out there, government-wise, that are really, I guess, truly going mobile, I guess? Any like small local governments that are doing it on a small scale that are just, okay, we're just gonna get rid of all the old technology and just start anew? Is anybody doing like a clean slate kind of thing?
Yeah. We have a client, it's a larger one. We have both small and large, but Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, they have 6,000 users on our application today, and they use the paper tablets, as was talked about earlier this morning. Well, one of the things that the deputy director has laid out for all of Caltrans, he believes that he needs to arm his crew leads and supervisors with mobile devices. He believes every single one needs to have a mobile device because they believe the closer the supervisor is to their team, their crew, the safer that crew is. So it becomes a safety issue. So one of the things that Caltrans is looking to do is to make a heavy investment in outfitting all of their crew leads and supervisors so they can be on site. They can see all the information they need to see, work with contractors that are on site, cost out, see financial reports, do requisitions directly from the field in real time, GIS. They don't want them having to go back to the truck, leaving their crew. You know, when it's snowing up in Lake Tahoe and there's 13 feet of snow, he needs to be there with his crew. So we see clients, you know, changing the way they're doing business because of other reasons. One, in Caltrans, being safety.
Just a little observation again, but like we all know that we are getting more and more mobile, and as she asked that question, like how many people have these mobile devices? So we see this tidal wave of pressure on government to start allowing more and more mobile devices or people wanting to use their mobile devices to access all this information. And I guess that's why Sunny wants, like for one thing, we do a lot of web development. All of our web pages pretty much that we're developing so that they will show as best as we can on a variety of mobile devices. So that's part of the thing that we're doing. But there is a whole bunch of other stuff that everybody wants information on. Like people want information on their taxes, on their land, et cetera. All that other stuff, there's people working on the back end to try to get all this information into a format that can be seen on and accessed and massaged on mobile devices. And I know I don't know who here might be working on some of those projects, but it takes a lot of work to just change the business process of the state so that we can get all this information out there for the public to use on information devices. And it's going to take a little bit of time because I see a lot of people taking all kinds of training classes on how to format their data in different ways, et cetera. So all I can say is that I see a lot of projects out there that are going on to get all this information out there to everybody, but it's just going to take a little bit of time and changing of the way that we do things.
And I would add, the process does take some time to change, of course, in government, but it also takes change agents and leadership. As your leadership is trying to set forth a vision and a direction, you can also do that within your own departments, within your own agencies. You know, you can start small. Everything doesn't have to be a massive project. A lot of the early mobile applications that have been developed by government were a couple of people in a department that had a little idea and they didn't go through procurement. They just put a little thing out there. So you can do those kind of things. And I think also your earlier question, again, being a relatively young company, you know, in government, and the state of Nebraska was one of our first customers that said, you know, we're just going to make the decision. You're going where we want to go. We're going cloud. You know, it's natively mobile. And so, you know, in our case, we are now seeing governments sort of open up to what we would say is a new way of thinking about how to evaluate innovation, because it's been a challenge, I think, for some time, sometimes because of the procurement processes or those kind of things, for government to be able to evaluate new technologies, young innovative technologies. And so, but I think the mindset is out there now because we are in the next few years a transition of the next generation of technology, as some of us have been through the mainframe days and the client server days, and then we had some, you know, web access days, and and now we have mobile days. So that's what I would add as well.
I guess we had a question over here on the side. Yes.
Yeah, I was getting back just to how we utilize mobile devices in government. We're talking about, we're worried about security. We want employees to be able to access things while they're on the road. Are there any, I know there's a lot of questions to ask about, you know, how you encrypt data with a secure device or whatnot. Is there a list of best practices, recommendations, whether it be from the feds or on the state level, in terms of if you're going to use mobile devices, this is how you roll it out. These are things that you should do to protect not only the device, but the data as well.
One of the websites that I put up that's on my slide, which I know you'll have access to, is the federal policy, where they've done a lot of work across their agencies on just sort of exactly that topic and what the agencies and the departments were looking for. So I think that is one good resource where you can go and take a look at how they crafted their policy to enable this across the federal government. And I think there are a number of places. Again, the National Association of State CIO Officers is another organization, association for government, where you can see some of that advice as well.
So also to add to Sherry's comments, the state meets every Wednesday to do an enterprise architecture working group, and mobility is one of the topics currently being pushed through. And as part of those discussions, we talk about the standards, the policy, things of that nature. So, and out of that, there's working groups, sub-working groups to talk about those kinds of issues and to kind of, come up with a list of the standards, guidelines, things of that nature to help guide departments. And there's various departments that are involved in these subgroups, so that everybody has their business requirements, at the table, I guess. So, basically, to answer your question, those kinds of things are being worked on.
My only thing I would add to that is potentially talk to your peers. Standardization is coming, but it's not coming fast enough. And there are state agencies out there that are out there on the limb doing it on their own by trial and error. Some are crashing and burning, and some are actually successful. And if you collaborate with your peers, you guys have a lot of similar problems, right? You may be able to leverage some of their best practices that could work for, Hawaii. That would be my advice.